the blue dress on. You have found NH Unscripted. I am your Mitch Ryder-like host, Ray Dudley. We are coming to you from the dating game like digs of the WKXL studios in Concord. Yeah, you know the drill. Get out the transistor radios, fire up the Motorola, gather the kids around because we got another barn burner for you. On your AM band, you will find us at 1450. And the FM band, you'll find us at 103.9. Those are Concord. And for the beautiful blessed souls in Manchester, 101.9 FM. And our URL, because we are the cool kids and have one, nhtalkradio.com. I'll give you a little bit more info about what's happening out there later in the show. I need to thank my sponsor, Lakes Region Fence. I appreciate so much the fact that they have sponsored our show over this almost year now. Lakes Region Fence, looks, folks, it's tax time. What are you going to do with that return? Come on, look outside around that pool. You could use an upgraded fence, couldn't you? Maybe your property line is a little damaged, a little dinged up. Time to shell out, reach deep into the pockets. Thank the IRS for sending you some money back. Never mind, I don't want to get political on that. But anyway, Lakes Region Fence, lrfence.com. You can go out there, you can click the button, you'll get a free estimate. Matt and the group, they do tremendous work. There are reams of photos out there on their website. They do PVC, they do cedar, they do, just go out, you'll find out. Lakes Region Fence, lrfence.com. Thank you, Matt. We appreciate it so much. I have one more announcement to make. NH Opera Idol competition coming up Sunday, April 28th at 3 p.m. at the Capitol Center for the Arts. Tickets are on sale, and the audience will be the ones choosing the winners. How do you think about that? Well, I have a repeat guest because I liked her so much last time, and she's a wealth of information. Amy Antonucci with the Seacoast Permaculture Group. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing all right, enjoying these warming days. How about you?
I am same. Tired of bailing out my basement from all that rain. My gosh. Amy, I have a lot of questions and a lot of things I'd like to find out about permaculture, and you are the person who I am currently considering to be my expert. Hey, by the way, did the goat have the baby?
She did. She gave birth just about a week ago.
What do they call it? What do they call a baby goat? Just a baby.
A kid.
A kid. Yes, of course. I knew that.
Yep.
I knew.
Yep. She had twins. And it went great.
Well, twins.
Yeah.
Wait, were they black? No, am I looking at another? I was thinking another one. I think another farm.
One is dark and one is orange. Orange?
Is that typical?
Well, in the Nigerian dwarf breed, they have a multitude of different colors and patterns, so it is in them, yeah.
No checkered, though, right?
Not that I've seen.
Okay. Amy, I wanted to talk to you about permaculture, and as people's eyes tend to glaze over when they hear the word, and it almost seems like it's just an arrogant way to talk about organic gardening.
Uh-huh.
But could you explain the difference between organic gardening and permaculture?
Yes. Well, let me tell you how I see it as, I'm not sure I love the word expert, but someone who has been doing this a while.
We'll lean towards expert, just you and me here.
Okay, all right, okay. But this is a large sort of developing field, so I'm sure others would have some different definitions, but I will tell you that actually permaculture isn't about gardening at all. Permaculture is a way of looking at the world and applying natural ecosystem principles and design principles to create anything. it just happens to have been so far particularly used and particularly succeeded in the realm of food growing.
That is very well articulated. I hadn't thought of it on that level, because I have always leaned into it more on the gardening side of it. But now that you mention that, for people who are familiar with or not, Paul Wheaton out in, is it Montana? Is he in Montana? Where they do they have like yurts. They have built cabins like right into the side of a mountain, right into it, so that it gets the thermal temperature from the ground itself to help heat, and he's got a lot of other stuff going on out there too. And now that you mention it, it is more encompassing than what I had thought of at first. So there are similarities, though, right? I mean, let's stick with gardening for now. So there's some overlap there. Would you agree?
Between organic and permaculture?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think organic gardening has a wider lens than industrial gardening or farming, let's say. And permaculture is an even wider lens. But, so organic gardening is particularly, and it's wonderful. I've been working in organic gardening or farming for decades, and they're wonderful people, and some of them are doing particularly amazing work, really focused on soil building and whole system thinking. There's the whole holistic grazing movement, putting lots more pieces into the puzzle, looking beyond just like how much corn can we grow. So that's a great step, and I love being in the organic movement and world. For me, I still saw some things in the organic farms I was working on that didn't quite seem, well, at the time we used the word sustainable a lot. And it's when I turned to permaculture that I felt like I had found a system that was truly going to, sustain and even regenerate the systems that we depend on.
Ooh, I like that word, regenerate. Ooh, yes. So on the scale or scope of gardening, you've got folks who just kind of garden in a pot or something, and then you've got folks who garden, and they bring in like the miracle grow and everything that they can add in all the time. Then the step up from that would kind of be folks who or leaning towards organic, right? They might get the stuff that is more like bone meal and all of that is not quite as chemically. Is that even a word? It's not as chemical based or synthetic,
right?
And then, but it's still an additive. It's still something outside the system being brought in. And then there's permaculture, which is it true? It's more of an enclosed system. Would you agree with that?
Well, it depends on how you define these things, because the truth is we're all in an enclosed system.
You went there. I see. Okay.
Except that the sun is sort of outside the system, isn't it?
It sort of is. Yes, thankfully, I think.
Yeah. There's this particular place of, being not too close, not too far, etc. So what I will say is that when I look at my garden, what I'm trying to do, when I look at my whole life, honestly, is I'm trying to localize. I'm trying to start where I am and do everything I can where I am and then go out from there, okay? So, for instance, I'll even if I wasn't growing food, I would want to buy my onions, my carrots, and my beets from somewhere I could hopefully even walk to, because that's all growing right here, right?
Yeah.
Chocolate, olive oil, I'm not going to do that because that's not growing here, right?
Not yet.
I'm going to eat less of those because they're harder to get and thus should be more expensive. But it's sort of again, it's around more outlook than hard and fast rules.
Yes, hang on there. I'm hearing some music in the background. Time to take a break. We got to pay some bills. Amy Antonucci, my permaculture expert, whether she likes to be called that or not. You are listening to NH Unscripted. I am your always happy to be out of bed host, Ray Dudley, coming to you from the not so overly ostentatious digs of the WKXL studios. 1450 AM, 103.9 FM, 101.9 FM in Manchester. NHTalkRadio.com is our URL. Amy and I will be right back. Desperado, you better let somebody love you. You are listening to NH Unscripted. I am your Eagles-like host, Ray Dudley. We are coming to you from the bonanza-like digs of the WKXL studios. I know I like to think I'm Little Joe, but I'm more like horse cart, right? But anyway, you are listening to us on either 1450 AM, 103.9 FM in Concord, 101.9 FM in Manchester, or maybe you went out to nhtalkradio.com, our URL, and you're listening to us streaming live. Amy Antonucci is on the line. We are talking permaculture. Don't let your eyes roll back in your head. This is important. Trust me. Amy, I did ask if you would think about the topic of soil building. Now, a lot of people don't use those words, soil building. So can you chat a little bit or tell us a little bit about what you believe that to mean, and we'll go off from there.
Yeah, well, yeah, soil is something that I love and I love to talk about, and it's quite a dramatic place filled with life and death and lots of poop, which, I don't know, younger kids love it, I'll tell you that much. So when I teach classes on soil, the first place I start is by talking with people about the soil ecosystem and helping people understand that it is an ecosystem. Now, again, a permacultural way of approaching all this is to try to understand it, also known as observe and interact, before we intervene, right? So having some grasp of what the system is helps us know how to support it. And I think a lot of people never do that first part, and thus they're just kind of throwing stuff at their gardens, and they don't really understand why it does or doesn't work.
So the first thing you think people should do is walk out their front door or their back door and look at their property, their dirt, their garden area, and begin to understand what it may or may not be able to do?
Well, I think there are two ways to do this. One is actual research, and there's great ways of doing that these days. There's so many wonderful groups and writers and beautiful books about the soil. Also, yes, to go out and look and learn, that's what you might want to do is, dig a little bit, see what's there, see what's been growing, what isn't, and then you can write that all down and come in and do a little research. That's the beauty of some of this technology we have, that we can really learn things quickly. So that can really help. I think the first thing to do is really let it sink in that it is an ecosystem. So you are really trying to nurture. I remember years ago at an organic farming conference I was at, a large-scale vegetable grower was giving a talk, and he said, I don't actually think of myself as growing plants. I'm more ranching critters. So he thought of himself as a soil microorganism rancher more than a plant grower.
Ooh, there's a view.
So really his whole thing, and this is a little simplistic, but not that simplistic, is that if he made the soil healthy, if he made the ecosystem thrive in the soil and in the larger picture, because they influence each other, then the plants would grow well. And he didn't have to mess around with dealing with pests and diseases and all this stuff so much because it was taking care of itself.
So let's say you've got somebody, they go out, they look at their yard, they think, okay, I want to grow stuff. Where do they begin? I mean, I do know that you could take a soil sample, send it over to UNH. They'll test it for you over there. I mean, for a price, but they'll still test it for you. Is that a good place to start, or do you just pick up a handful of it and try to figure out what you're looking at?
Yeah, well, the soil testing, the actually really good soil testing is much more expensive than UNH. Cornell has the best lab, in my opinion, though there are other good ones, but for the money, I think Cornell does a really good job, because what they're testing is not just the chemical constituents, but is there life in the soil, and that's really what you want. But yeah, okay, in my place, I just started by walking around. Well, we had to actually take out some trees first to let some sun in. And then we noticed that our soil was essentially not existent.
Yeah.
It was roots and it was rocks and it was literally, we're in one of these places, there's rock walls everywhere. So we know that this property was part of the sheep craze, which is, like 150 plus years ago now.
Welcome to New England.
Yeah, a big boom in sheep. And it was overgrazed, essentially. There used to be soil here, but it was overgrazed by the earlier settlers. So we're in a place where it's, the forest was regenerating it, but we needed food now. So we intervened to speed up the soil building process. What do
you mean by that? You intervened?
Yeah. So what we did, first of all, was walk around and map things out a little bit and figure out, like, okay, is there a slope? Do I want things on contour? Do I want, what is the best infrastructure that I can do? How can I build this that it will hold water, that it will catch sun, that it will be in a sunny pocket, things like that. Just looking at the landscape that I had to work with. And then I charted out where my beds would go. And then I started to do what we call in the permaculture world, sheet mulching. In other places, it's called, for instance, lasagna gardening. Another term, Lee Reich down in, I think he's in Connecticut now, maybe New Jersey, calls it weedless gardening. And it's the process, really, of mimicking what a forest does. How does a forest build soil, Ray? Do you know?
The leaves fall on the ground, never get raked up. They decompose, become for its own fertilizer. Mycelium grows, all that stuff in there, and just feeds itself.
Yeah. I mean, and if you think about it...
No one tills it. No one tends it.
Right. And if you think about it, it's even more that because you've got animals and trees fall and animals die and everything poops. And there's this whole layering process, right?
Yes.
How often does anyone turn the soil in a forest?
Never.
Right. Like if you were to go and churn the soil and rip everything up and churn it all up and turn around and say, look, isn't it healthier? That would make, you laugh at that, right?
Yeah, right.
Right. So what we do in sheet mulching is to mimic the process that we see. And there's other systems, for instance, the prairies. This is a great one. The prairies of this country and other countries are so rich. And do you know how that happened?
I'm going to say no on that one.
Okay. So large groups of pooping animals, right?
Like buffalo.
Yep. In this case, mostly buffalo, moving across the plains, across the grasslands, followed by birds to kick up, go through their poop, eat the worms and things. And they are moving along because there are predators, whether that was the native people or big cats or whatever. But they're moving along, following the green grass and being pushed by the predators.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of a similar thing. They're eating, well, there's a little more going on because when they eat down the grass, the roots die back some, and that builds organic matter. Mm-hmm. So there's a really dynamic, and that's actually a much faster way of building soil than a forest. But in any case, it's about layering, really. It's not about turning over. So this is where I always tell people, your number one thing to learn is just don't buy a rototiller. If you have one, retire it. It's doesn't help.
You are literally a no-till gardener. Is that what you're saying?
We don't own a rototiller.
How about, do you even disturb the soil at all?
Well, yeah. I mean, in a way, there are things that are happening that would qualify as some amount of disturbance, but not very much.
You don't have one of those big fork tine things and...
I don't. Those are a good idea, though, if you have a really compacted, like if you have soil but it's just really compacted, then those broad forks where you put them in the ground and you just rock back and forth.
Yeah.
So you're not churning anything, you're just opening up some air holes.
Yeah.
And places for the rain to get down. That absolutely makes sense. That wasn't really, our problem was more, you couldn't even get a shovel in the ground. There was nothing really that was open like that.
All right, hang on. Oh, I've got so many questions. You've opened up so many doors for me. Amy, oh God, I love you. All right, you are listening to NH Unscripted. I am your inquisitive host, Ray Dudley. Always happy to be out of the home. You are listening to us on either 1450 AM or 103.9 FM in Concord, 101.9 FM for the beautiful souls in Manchester. Or maybe you touched us out there at nhtalkradio.com. Who cares? You're listening. Amy Antonucci, Seacoast Permaculture Group, is on the line, and we're talking gardening. We'll be right back. When I get off of this mountain, yeah, we're not up on Cripple Creek, but who cares? It's NH Unscripted. I am your happy to be out of bed host, Ray. Still wearing my bunny slippers. Yes, I am. We are coming to you from 1450 AM or 103.9 FM in Concord, 101.9 FM in Manchester, from the Taj Mahal-like digs of the WKXL studios. NHTalkRadio.com is our URL where you can find a button to listen to us live, or if you wanted to, you could be a happy camper and get all of the archived episodes of this show, plus all the other things that happen here. Amy Antonucci is discussing lasagna gardening. Amy, my wife, is collecting cardboard boxes. I look like I've gone to the dump at my house. They're like stacked up. She keeps bringing home newspapers from work. And I keep telling her, what are we doing with this? She cannot wait for spring because she wants the lasagna garden. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It is one of my favorite things to do. Essentially, it's mimicking these natural processes that we already talked about in order to build soil. So a great way to, you use what's around you, but I tend to, given what I have access to, cardboard is a great place to start. It's also good at smothering weeds if you have any weed issues. And it is, it's one of many things that attract worms. So, so that first layer of cardboard and newspaper. And then it's sort of what else is around you. Manure is a great one. Remember our buffalo across the plains pooping?
Yep.
Where I am, seaweed is a big one. I'll go and get a truckload of seaweed to add to that. Coffee grounds is something that most of us have real access to. We have a deal or whatever, an arrangement with a local coffee, what do they call it?
Roaster?
Like coffee shop, that's the
Yeah.
right word. Where we bring 5-gallon buckets and take full ones, bring empty, take full.
Yeah.
So those can go in there. That's another thing worms love. Leaves, especially maple leaves, I found.
Would you lay them down whole, or would you mulch them up first?
Well, it depends on what they are. If they're maple, I wouldn't bother chopping them up. Oak, those take much longer and thus can make like a barrier. They can kind of turn into a mat. So if you'd wanted to use oak, I would definitely chop those up or let them sit a while and break down some before, maybe put them into a compost. And that's another thing you can add, although honestly, it's kind of, I would top it things with compost. Compost is like a kind of finished product, and you're sort of trying to make an unfinished product. You want to make a system where there's a lot to eat, not a lot of stuff that has been eaten. So having that fresher stuff in there is fine. Other things that I've seen people put in, well, then like any kind of paper, really. I have folks who like shred documents and they shove that in there. Moldy hay, gross hay.
Yeah, we would consider it to be gross, right? But it's actually very nutritious on a microorganism level, right?
Right. Well, and that's part of the whole beauty of these systems is, we eat things that others don't want, and they eat things that we don't want, and this is part of the cycle and these different niches where we all get something. And the things that gross me out, the microorganisms or the goats love, and other way around.
So when you do anything, so you lay down some cardboard, and do you wet it at that point, or do you just pile everything on, and what's the process there?
So a lot of people are really into wetting it. I have never done that. I think where I am is moist enough, cool enough, whatever, that it pulls in water. We just have never needed to do that. So we just layer it up. And I mean, this is why I like doing classes so that people can really see. I mean, up to my knees, the height of these.
What?
Is. I don't mean like an inch of each. I mean like 6 inches of each of these things.
What?
Yeah.
What? Okay, I can't get my head around that picture. 6 inches of cardboard followed by... What? Go ahead.
Yeah, let me start again. Yeah. The cardboard, just a good thick layer of whatever you got, an inch or so.
Okay.
And then you start like 6 inches of manure, and then 6 inches of seaweed. I mean, it's fluffy, right? It'll cook down, as we say.
Yeah.
But have a nice... Originally, I started with, I think my first sheet mulch was when I finished like maybe a foot, and it really didn't work. It just kind of wasn't enough to really get the system going. So I built up.
Where do you get enough manure for that? A foot, 6 inches of manure? I mean...
Well, I drive around and I look for animals, large animals that poop, and I knock on the doors and I talk to their people, and there you go.
Amy, are you known in your neighborhood as the crazy lady?
Yes. Well, I'll tell you, I have a number of neighbors who joined the permaculture group because they wanted to figure out what the heck I was doing. And they're now very good friends, so it works.
That's what I tell my wife. She's always out there. I'm thinking, I say to her, everyone who goes by is like, oh, there's that crazy old lady out there. She's got her muck boots on, and God only knows what she's up to today.
Yep.
So, okay, so when you're done, what's the finished product looking like?
Well, it looks like a big mound. So these are technically raised beds. I don't make the sides usually,
okay,
unless there's some specific reason, and there are some places that we do for a specific reason. But generally, I just think that wood's going to break down, and I'm going to have to replace it, and what a pain. Yeah. So I just make mounds, mound agriculture, which is actually what hugelkultur specifically really means.
I love hugelkultur.
Yeah, that's another aspect of this process that you can work in. So, yeah, it looks like a big mound, and then I top it, I cover it Well, I like to top it with something relatively finished, whether that's pretty finished manure or actual compost that I can plant into.
On top.
And then say again?
On top? That's the top layer?
Well, it's the almost top layer.
Okay.
And then I mulch it with something that is more thought of as a mulch, like hay, like wood chips, like what else do people use? I know some people use seaweed. I don't find that to work as well, but some people like that.
You just use seaweed for salt, right? You're just creating salt out there somewhere, aren't you?
Well, I'm pulling in the minerals.
Got
so
you.
the ocean is filled with mineral salts.
Yeah.
It's salt is the format that all these minerals are, but there's tons. Every kind of mineral pretty much is in there.
Yeah.
And the land is always losing minerals to the ocean, and there has to be a way to bring it back on. And there are many mechanisms in other systems for doing that, but humans work. We can do that work.
So, gosh, how are you getting organisms in here? I mean, so I get the cardboard, I get the newspaper, and I understand manure. Where is the life coming from?
Well, this is a build it and they will come kind of a moment.
I see.
They're out there. That's the thing. Think about like when your fruit goes bad, when the fruit flies are there in a second. You're like, how did they know? The world is just built to fill in these gaps, and we haven't messed it up enough yet that it never works. So I've never needed to add life. I just assume that there's enough there in the bit of soil that the forests have built up that will make its way in, and so far that's worked. My soil tests are, I use this Cornell thing where it uses different tests to see if there's life in the soil, and I'm always at 100 out of 100 on those.
Wow. So when you have finished this mound that you have, and I want to talk to you about wood chips too. How long do you let it set before you decide it's okay to start planting into?
5 minutes.
What? 5 minutes? I was thinking you were going to say a year.
No.
Wait.
Part of a healthy soil ecosystem is roots, living roots. You want them in there right away.
I'm having an aneurysm.
Oh, no!
I'm trying to think here. You go out in your yard, you create this mound that's like, 12 inches, 18 inches high, and you immediately start planting into it?
Yeah.
Oh, hang on. The music's playing. No, this can't be. Oh, you are listening to NH Unscripted. I am your currently frustrated host, Ray Dudley. We are coming to you from the monk-like conditions of the WKXL studios in Concord, 1450 AM, 103.9 FM. And for you people in Manchester, 101.9 on the FM band down there, nhtalkradio.com is our URL. I am running out of time. Amy Antonucci's here talking about building garden beds. Well, not the bed part, but yeah, we'll get back to it. We'll be right back. I go to Rio de Janeiro, and I go to NH Unscripted. Well, we've landed then, haven't we? You are listening to NH Unscripted. I am your greatly appreciative host, Ray Dudley. We are coming to you from the Car 54-like digs of the WKXL studios in Concord. I'm your Tootie Muldoon host. You are listening to us either at 1450 AM, 103.9 FM in Concord, 101.9 FM in Manchester, or perhaps you've strolled out to nhtalkradio.com and found us out there. Amy Antonucci is telling us about building soil. Amy, you said you build this lasagna garden bed, not using lasagna for those who just joined us, but cardboard, newspaper, manure, something on top of that, maybe compost or whatever. And by the time you're done, it's 12 to 18 inches thick, and you immediately plant into it?
Yes.
You're not afraid of it having no nutrients at that point, basically, or you're not worried about wood chips that maybe might there's a nitrogen problem there at all?
Okay, so first of all, you have just made a whole bed of nutrients. You have nutrients.
But it's cardboard that hasn't broken down yet, and newspaper that...
Well, that's pretty far down. Especially if you put in something like manure and seaweed, you have tons of nutrients in there. What you're waiting for is the kind of life to move in and get it kick-started, but I'm telling you, that's going to happen fast.
Okay.
So what I do now... Often I'm using kind of fresh manure, so I don't plant any root crops, okay?
Got you.
So I'm going to plant things that are going to grow above the ground, and again, I'm going to mulch really well. I'm going to have the manure farther down just to be safe. I mean, most of us gardeners aren't selling, but just to be extra safe.
Yep. So you would use aged, preferably, is that... True?
Yeah, so the fresher it is, the lower in the thing it goes.
Got you.
But other than that, that's really the only concern that I have. Otherwise, I trust it. I trust that the soil organisms are going to get in there fast, that things are going to start breaking down. I remember once I made a hogel mound, it was still cold out, and I went down a few days later, and there was steam rising off it.
Man, oh man.
It was like literally cooking. It was, in fact, I had planted some things that got kind of burnt because of that. I had to replant a little bit. But generally, I will plant something like tomatoes, like squash. The beans could work, and then they add some of their own nitrogen. So I plant things that go up and aren't touching the soil. But no, it really, in my experience, is it really kicks in fast, and it's even faster for having. In fact, if you really are worried about eating out of it, do a cover crop.
Oh, yeah.
Know that the right away having because what you're trying to do is stimulate the underground economy, and that is an interchange between the roots of the plants and all the microorganisms.
Yeah.
That's what makes it hum. Are
there certain cover crops that you prefer?
Well, I really like oats because they winter kill, and since I'm no-till, I want something that's easy to not have to fight with weed-wise later.
So you don't put like in rye or anything that you would then turn in, because you don't turn it in.
Yeah, I don't turn anything.
Are you a chop and drop kind of person for your?
Yeah,
you are.
Yeah. And I have put in some things. There are some cover crops in some of my larger areas, not so much the annual garden, but more the orchards that I've made in similar way that I allow to kind of come back some, and that has worked okay. If need be, I smother it out.
With what?
Cardboard.
Again, on top?
Yep. If I have to. I mean, usually, though, I don't need to go that far. I've never planted a cover crop that was except for vetch. I don't plant vetch because I find that really, really difficult to contain.
I've heard that before.
Yeah.
So you think anybody could do this I would think for those who have never done anything like this, a smaller plot where that they're not trying to do like a half an acre of cardboard, 6 inches thick.
Right.
You said you wouldn't do cardboard that thick, but you could much more easily do this on a smaller scale, right? Because it's not that hard to do a 2 foot by 2 foot section.
Right. I mean, generally, and again, if we're talking gardeners, and if we're talking people just getting started, then I always say err on starting smaller and getting the hang of it and then expand from there. Because doing something that's difficult a little bit, you can deal with. Doing something you don't know how to do, a ton of it, that is really overwhelming. And what you want this to be is a fun, growing, building kind of experience, not something that you go, oh, this sucks.
Yeah.
In fact, I know people who jumped in with permaculture, and in the first year they did an acre of a garden, and they got pigs, and they got chickens, and they got ducks, and none of them are doing it anymore. It's really, really a good idea. Or they majorly scale back. That I have been a real it's worked for me to start small and build.
Yeah, we jumped in. We made that mistake. We had like 12 chickens at one time, and I love them. They're cute as a button, but they were so destructive. Because I would not cage them. I had this thing about letting them free range, and so they would 12 of them would just get out there and tear up everything their little claws could get a hold of.
Oh, yeah.
And it was brutal. And so my wife's still talking now about getting back into chickens, and we both understand, 3, maybe 4 might be the most we want to get into at this point. And so...
and also, honestly, I do not do free range. I do rotational.
So you put them in those... what do they call them? Where you pull them around and...
Well, we do have some chicken tractors, we call them.
Yeah.
The movable coops.
Yeah.
But more than that, we have, like, the area that is behind their coop, we have a bunch of different fences so we can send them in one direction or another.
Oh, like pens, so like little directional pens that you can...
Yeah, and you can find designs, or if you come here this summer and check out what I'm doing, I'll show you what we're up to. So... But yeah, they cannot go in the garden. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Yeah. Containment and again, remembering that permaculture is a lot about design and setting up systems that will do the work, that will make things happen efficiently and elegantly and more easily for you.
Are there some plants that you like? Really, really lean towards. I'm not talking about vegetables necessarily, but I'm thinking like, isn't something like comfrey big in permaculture?
Yeah, there are a number of soil building sorts of plants, and I have most of them around. I definitely have comfrey, nettles, sweet cicely. What are some of the other? There's so many great plants.
What's the purpose of that? Why would you even think about? Some folks may never have heard even of comfrey. Why would you even bring it in?
Right. So comfrey has a very long, deep taproot. It's very good at scavenging minerals that have washed too far down for any of your annuals to get to, for instance. And then it sucks that up, puts it in its leaves, makes some really sweet little flowers that the bumblebees love. And then you have access to it. For us, it's also forage. I cut the tops and I feed them to the goats. That gets them some minerals. Or you can just chop and drop in place. That, again, adds minerals on top. You can chop it and mulch things with it. So for me, it's particularly in my orchard areas, or, not, again, in the annual garden, but having some spots with plants like that I can use in the system in other ways is really helpful. So it's not food so much as it's, another, it's feeding another aspect of the system. Even if it's not directly feeding me.
So for people who may walk out into their yard and see a dandelion, you don't freak out when you see that, do you?
I planted dandelions there.
Why would you do that?
Dandelions are one of my absolute favorite plants.
What?
Yes, I know.
Why? What would why? People go out and if they freak out when they see dandelions. Is that serious?
I'm going to turn it around. Why not dandelions? What's wrong with dandelions?
Amy, we have to end on that question. Can you give me a URL for your farm or for the Seacoast Permaculture Group?
Sure. Seacoast NH Permaculture, .org, I think. Oh my God. And I think, livinglandpermaculture.com.
Amy Antonucci, she did it. You are listening to NH Unscripted. I was so glad to be your host for this segment. Ray Dudley. We are coming to you from 1450 AM, 103.9 FM in Concord, 101.9 FM in Manchester. NHTalkRadio.com is our URL. Go out and learn about permaculture. Or give Amy a call. She knows it all. Thank you, Amy.